Picture this. It is August 11th, 1697, and you are standing on the western bank of the Tisza River in modern-day Serbia. You are one of 80,000 Ottoman soldiers, the finest warriors of the Sultan's army. Behind you stretches an empire that has terrified Europe for 3 centuries. Ahead of you, across this muddy river, lies the prize. Vienna, the heart of Christian Europe, almost within your grasp. Your commanders have assured you that the Austrian army is scattered, weak, and demoralized. They say this crossing will be unopposed. They say you will be in Vienna before the leaves turn. But as the first boats push into the current, something feels wrong. The silence on the far bank is too complete. The fog hanging over the water is too thick. And then, as your comrades begin the crossing, the world explodes. The riverbanks erupt in fire and thunder. Cannonballs tear through the packed boats like a scythe through wheat. Men scream as the water turns red. Horses thrash and drown in their armor. The boats splinter and sink. And you realize, with sickening clarity, that you are not crossing into an empty field. You are crossing into the most perfectly laid trap in military history. Before the sun sets on this day, 30,000 of your brothers will be dead. Most will never reach the other side. The river will be so choked with corpses that men will later claim you could walk across on the bodies. This is not a battle. This is an execution. And the man orchestrating your destruction is a 73-year-old prince who history will remember as one of the greatest military minds Europe ever produced. His name is Eugene of Savoy, and today he is about to save Christian Europe from Ottoman conquest and deliver a blow so devastating that the Ottoman Empire will never fully recover. To understand how 80,000 men walked into this nightmare, you have to go back 15 years to a moment when Europe was on its knees. The year is 1683. And the Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed IV, has decided that the time has finally come to finish what his ancestors started. Constantinople fell in 1453. The Balkans are conquered, Hungary is occupied. Now, the Sultan's eyes are fixed on the ultimate prize, Vienna, the gateway to Western Europe. In July of 1683, Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha marches on Vienna with over 100,000 men. It is the largest army the Ottomans have ever fielded in Europe. The siege that follows nearly succeeds. For 2 months, the city holds by a thread. Food runs out. Disease spreads. The walls crumble under constant bombardment. The defenders, starving and exhausted, prepare for the final assault that will surely overwhelm them. Inside Vienna, the situation is desperate beyond imagination. The garrison commander, Count Ernst Rudiger von Starhemberg, watches his men die by the dozens every day. They are eating horses, rats, anything they can find. The civilian population is hiding in cellars, praying for deliverance that seems impossible. The Ottoman miners are tunneling under the walls, packing the tunnels with gunpowder. When those mines explode, whole sections of the city's defenses collapse in clouds of smoke and rubble. The Viennese fill the gaps with anything they can find: furniture, wagons, corpses. They know that when the walls finally fail completely, the slaughter will begin. But on September 12th, 1683, something miraculous happens. King John Sobieski of Poland arrives with a relief army. On the hills outside Vienna, he assembles the largest cavalry charge in history. 20,000 Polish, German, and Austrian horsemen thunder down the slopes in a coordinated assault that shatters the Ottoman camp. Kara Mustafa flees. The siege is broken. Vienna is saved. The charge itself is a spectacle that witnesses describe as if the earth itself was moving. The Polish winged hussars, wearing their distinctive feathered wings that create a terrifying rushing sound as they gallop, lead the assault. Behind them come German cuirassiers in blackened armor and Austrian dragoons. The ground shakes. The Ottoman soldiers, exhausted from 2 months of siege warfare, look up the hill and see what appears to be an avalanche of steel and horseflesh bearing down on them. Some try to form defensive lines. Most simply run. The Ottoman camp is overrun in less than an hour. Sobieski's men capture the Grand Vizier's personal tent, a structure so large it requires 9 wagons to transport. Inside, they find treasures that beggar belief: gold coins by the barrel, jeweled weapons, silk carpets, and the personal correspondence of the Sultan himself. The Polish king sits in Kara Mustafa's own chair and writes a letter to the Pope that begins with a variation of Julius Caesar's famous phrase, "I came, I saw, God conquered." For the Ottomans, this is more than a military defeat. It is a psychological catastrophe. For 300 years, they have been the ones advancing, the ones conquering, the ones inspiring terror. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 had seemed to mark the beginning of an unstoppable expansion. They had taken Greece, the Balkans, most of Hungary. They had raided the outskirts of Vienna before. Each time, they had withdrawn by choice, not by force. Now, for the first time in living memory, they are driven from the field in humiliating defeat, and Europe, smelling blood in the water, forms an alliance to finish the job. They call it the Holy League: Austria, Poland, Venice, and later, Russia. Pope Innocent XI blesses the alliance and provides financial support. The goal is simple and brutal: drive the Ottomans out of Europe forever. For centuries, Christian kingdoms have fought each other more often than they have fought the common enemy. Now, finally, they are united in a common cause. What follows is 15 years of grinding, brutal warfare. The campaigns are fought across Hungary, Croatia, Serbia, and Greece. Towns change hands multiple times. Entire regions are depopulated by war and disease. The Ottomans lose Belgrade, the great fortress that guards the approach to the Balkans. They lose Budapest, the ancient capital of Hungary. They lose Buda and Pest, twin cities that had been Ottoman strongholds for over a century. They lose territories they have held for generations, lands their grandfathers conquered and their fathers defended. But they are not finished. They are wounded, yes, but a wounded beast is often the most dangerous. The Ottoman military system, for all its recent failures, is still formidable. The empire can draw on resources from 3 continents. The Janissary Corps, though bloodied, remains the most disciplined infantry force in the Islamic world. The Sipahi cavalry, feudal horsemen granted land in exchange for military service, can still field tens of thousands of armored riders. And the Sultan's artillery, cast in the foundries of Constantinople, includes some of the largest cannons in the world. By 1697, Sultan Mustafa II decides it is time to turn the tide. He is the first sultan in decades to personally lead an army into battle. His predecessors ruled from the comfort of Constantinople, sending viziers and pashas to do the fighting. But Mustafa, young and ambitious, believes that the Ottoman defeats come from a lack of decisive leadership. He will show Europe what a sultan can do when he takes personal command. He will reclaim Hungary, strike at the heart of Austria, and restore the glory of his empire. Mustafa assembles the largest Ottoman army in a generation, over 100,000 men. The core of his force is 15,000 Janissaries, the slave soldiers taken as boys from Christian families, converted to Islam, and trained in barracks from childhood. They are the Ottoman equivalent of the Roman Praetorian Guard, or Napoleon's Old Guard. They have never known any life except war. They are armed with the latest muskets from Ottoman arsenals and supported by engineers, sappers, and miners who can reduce any fortress to rubble. Supporting the Janissaries are 30,000 Sipahi cavalry. These are not light skirmishers, but heavy shock cavalry, comparable to European cuirassiers. They wear chainmail and plate armor, wield lances and sabers, and ride horses bred for strength and endurance. Each Sipahi is a landowner, a member of the military aristocracy, with everything to lose if the empire continues to contract. They fight with the desperation of men defending their inheritances. The rest of the army is a mix of provincial levies, Tatar light cavalry from the Crimea, Wallachian and Moldavian vassals, and irregular fighters from across the empire. Some are motivated by religious fervor, eager to wage jihad against the Christian infidels. Others are there because their local governor demanded troops and they had no choice. It is a massive, diverse force, a military migration that stretches for miles when on the march. The logistics alone are staggering. An army of 100,000 men requires thousands of tons of food every week. The Sultan's baggage train includes tens of thousands of camels, horses, and oxen hauling supplies. There are mobile bakeries to produce hardtack biscuits, butchers to process livestock, and smiths to repair weapons and horseshoes. There are water carriers, because marching armies die of thirst faster than they die of enemy action. The baggage train is a target of enormous value and equally enormous vulnerability. The Europeans, meanwhile, are scrambling. The Holy League is fraying at the edges. The Poles, exhausted by constant warfare and facing pressure on their eastern frontier from Russia, have made a separate peace with the Ottomans. King Jan Sobieski, the hero of Vienna, is dead, and his successors are less interested in crusading. The Venetians are distracted in Greece, fighting their own campaigns to capture islands and coastal cities. Only Austria remains fully committed to the war, and Austria is nearly bankrupt. Emperor Leopold I has spent 15 years funding armies, hiring mercenaries, and fortifying the frontier. his treasury is empty. The Habsburg lands have been bled dry by constant taxation. The nobles grumble about the cost. The peasants who bear the heaviest burden are on the edge of revolt. Leopold desperately needs a decisive victory to justify the sacrifices and secure the gains of the last 15 years. What he gets instead is a short, sickly French-Italian nobleman who no one expects to amount to anything. Eugene of Savoy is born in Paris in 1663 into a family that is aristocratic but scandalous. His mother, Olympia Mancini, is a niece of Cardinal Mazarin, the power behind the French throne. She is also rumored to be involved in poisoning scandals and black magic, charges so serious that she eventually flees France in disgrace. Eugene's father is Eugene Maurice of Savoy, a minor Italian prince who serves in the French army, but dies when Eugene is still a boy. This leaves young Eugene in a precarious position, noble by birth, but tainted by association with his mother's scandals. Eugene is the fifth son, which in aristocratic terms means he is utterly expendable. His older brothers will inherit titles and estates. For Eugene, the family expects him to enter the church. This is the traditional path for younger sons who are not needed to continue the bloodline. They become bishops or abbots, living comfortable lives, administering church lands, and collecting tithes. But Eugene has absolutely no interest in the priesthood. He wants to be a soldier. From an early age, Eugene is obsessed with military history. He reads everything he can find about Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and the great captains of history. He studies maps and tactics. He watches military drills and parades with intense focus. His tutors note that he has a brilliant mind for mathematics and geometry, skills that translate directly to military engineering and battlefield tactics. But he is also physically unprepossessing. He is short, less than 5.5 feet tall. He is thin and sickly, prone to fevers and illness. He has a weak chin and a high-pitched voice. By the standards of his time, he does not look like a warrior. When Eugene reaches his late teens, he begs King Louis XIV of France for a commission in the French army. Louis XIV, the Sun King, is at the height of his power. He rules France with absolute authority. His armies are the finest in Europe. His court at Versailles is the envy of the continent. When the scrawny, strange-looking young man appears before him, asking to become an officer, Louis cannot help himself. He laughs. "You are not built for war," the Sun King tells him. "You would do better in a monastery." It is a casual dismissal, the kind of offhand cruelty that powerful men inflict without thinking. Louis probably forgets about Eugene within minutes. But Eugene never forgets. The humiliation burns, the rejection festers. And in that moment, Eugene makes a decision that will change European history. If France does not want him, he will offer his sword to France's enemies. It is the biggest mistake Louis XIV ever makes. By rejecting Eugene, Louis creates the general who will defeat French armies again and again for the next 40 years. The young man whom Louis mocked as unfit for war will become one of the greatest military commanders in European history, winning battles from Italy to the Netherlands, from the Rhine to the Danube. And it all starts because one king was too arrogant to see the potential in an awkward teenager. Humiliated and furious, Eugene leaves France and travels to Austria. He offers his sword to the Habsburgs, the traditional rivals of the French monarchy. The Habsburgs, desperate for competent officers after years of war against the Ottomans, accept him immediately. They give him a commission as a colonel, a relatively low rank but one with real responsibility. Eugene is assigned to a regiment fighting in Hungary against the Ottoman forces that still occupy much of the country after the failed siege of Vienna. Eugene throws himself into military service with the intensity of a man trying to prove the world wrong. He does not command from the safety of the rear. He leads from the front, riding into battle beside his men, exposing himself to musket fire and sword blades. He is wounded multiple times in his first campaigns, but he refuses to leave the field. His men, initially skeptical of this foreign nobleman who barely speaks German, begin to respect him. He shares their hardships. He eats the same food, sleeps on the same ground, and bleeds the same blood. But more importantly, Eugene proves to have a gift for warfare that goes beyond mere courage. He has an almost supernatural ability to read a battlefield. He can look at terrain and instantly see the advantages and disadvantages. He can anticipate enemy movements before they happen. He understands logistics, the unglamorous science of supply lines and march routes that determines whether armies live or die. And he has no ego about tactics. If a peasant soldier has a good idea, Eugene listens. If a traditional approach is not working, he adapts. He learns from the Ottomans themselves, studying their tactics and finding ways to counter them. By 1697, Eugene is just 34 years old, but he is already a general. He has fought in a dozen battles and sieges. He has captured fortresses and routed enemy armies. Emperor Leopold trusts him, which is saying something, because Leopold is a cautious, suspicious man who trusts almost no one, but the court still whispers behind Eugene's back. They call him the Little Frenchman and question whether he has the stomach for a major campaign. They point out that he has never commanded an army of more than 20,000 men. They wonder if he can handle the pressure of facing the Sultan's main force. They are about to find out. In the summer of 1697, Sultan Mustafa II crosses the Danube and marches north into Habsburg territory. His strategy is classic Ottoman doctrine: overwhelm the enemy with numbers, capture key fortresses to secure the line of advance, and push toward Vienna before winter sets in. The Sultan's intelligence reports, provided by spies and sympathetic locals, tell him that the Austrian army is small, poorly supplied, and led by commanders who are either old or inexperienced. He is half right. The Austrian army is indeed small, barely 60,000 men. They are indeed poorly supplied, subsisting on short rations and outdated equipment. But the commander is neither old nor inexperienced. Prince Eugene receives his appointment as supreme commander of the Austrian forces in late July. Some of the older generals grumble about serving under a man young enough to be their son. Some of the court nobles question whether a foreigner, a Frenchman no less, should be trusted with the defense of the empire. But Eugene ignores the politics. He focuses on the reality of the situation. He has 60,000 men to stop 100,000 Ottomans. On paper, it is impossible. In an open field battle, the Ottomans will crush him through sheer weight of numbers. But Eugene does not plan to fight in an open field. Eugene studies the reports coming in from his scouts and spies. The Ottoman army is advancing in 3 separate columns to maximize their foraging ability and speed. This is standard practice for large armies in this era. If 100,000 men march in a single column, the rear units starve because the front units have already stripped the countryside of food. By spreading out, they can cover more ground and feed themselves more easily. But it also means the 3 columns are out of supporting distance from each other. If Eugene can catch one column isolated, he can achieve local numerical superiority even though he is outnumbered overall. Eugene does not panic. He does not retreat to Vienna and wait for a siege. He does not send desperate messages to the emperor begging for reinforcements that do not exist. Instead, he does something that shocks his officers. He advances to meet the enemy. "If we wait behind walls," Eugene tells his war council, "we will die behind walls." The Ottomans have spent 15 years on the defensive, losing battle after battle. They have forgotten what it means to face a European army that actually wants to fight. We will remind them. Eugene's plan is audacious, bordering on suicidal, at least in the eyes of his more conservative officers. He will take his smaller army and shadow the Ottoman advance like a wolf following a herd of buffalo. He will stay close enough to threaten them, but far enough to avoid being trapped. He will wait for them to make a mistake, to expose a vulnerability, to give him an opening, and when that moment comes, he will strike with everything he has. He needs terrain that will neutralize the Ottoman numerical advantage. He needs a bottleneck, a place where 80,000 men cannot bring their full weight to bear. He needs a river crossing. Eugene's scouts fan out across Hungary, tracking the 3 Ottoman columns and reporting back on their movements. The intelligence network that Eugene builds is one of his great advantages. He employs Hungarian irregulars who know every road and village in the region. He uses local peasants who hate the Ottomans and are eager to provide information. He even has spies inside the Ottoman camp, turncoats and deserters who sell information for gold. By late July, Eugene knows more about the Ottoman army's dispositions than some of the Sultan's own generals. The reports paint a clear picture. The Sultan is moving northwest, aiming to cross the Tisza River, and then swing west towards Szeged and eventually Vienna. The Tisza is a significant obstacle, wide and muddy, with only a few good crossing points. If the Ottomans can get across unopposed, they will have a clear road to the Austrian heartland. But if Eugene can catch them during the crossing, when they are split by the river and vulnerable, he might be able to destroy them. It is a long shot, but it is the best chance Eugene is going to get. By late July, Eugene orders a forced march. His men are already exhausted from weeks of maneuvering, but he drives them forward with promises of plunder and glory. The Sultan's baggage train, Eugene tells them, contains enough gold to make every one of you rich, but we have to earn it. The men grumble, but they march. They trust Eugene because he has never led them into a fight he could not win. They know he shares their dangers and their hardships. If Eugene says there is gold at the end of this march, they believe him. On August 10th, Eugene's scouts bring him the news he has been waiting for. The Ottoman army is approaching Zenta, a small town on the Tisza River. The Sultan himself is with the main body of the army. They are planning to cross at Zenta the next day. The far bank appears undefended. The Ottomans believe the Austrians are still days away, somewhere to the north. Eugene realizes instantly that this is his moment. If he can get his army to Zenta before the Ottomans complete the crossing, he can catch them split by the river, half on each bank, unable to support each other. It is exactly the scenario he has been praying for. But there is a problem. Zenta is over 20 miles away, and Eugene's men have already marched 15 miles today. They are exhausted, hungry, and footsore. Asking them to march another 20 miles and then fight a battle seems insane. Some of Eugene's officers suggest making camp and attacking in the morning when the men are rested. But Eugene knows that by morning, the Ottomans will have completed the crossing. The opportunity will be lost. "We march tonight," Eugene orders. "No fires, no noise, no stopping. We march until we reach Zenta or until we drop dead. Those are the only two options." The forced march that follows is one of the great feats of endurance in military history. 60,000 men march through the darkness, guided only by the stars and the dim light of a waning moon. They march in near total silence, because Eugene has ordered that anyone making unnecessary noise will be flogged. The only sounds are the shuffling of boots, the creaking of wagon wheels, and the occasional whinny of a horse. Men stumble and fall from exhaustion, but their comrades haul them back to their feet and keep moving. Some soldiers fall asleep while walking, their bodies moving on autopilot while their minds shut down. Eugene rides up and down the column throughout the night, encouraging the men, checking on the supply wagons, and consulting with his officers. He does not sleep. He cannot afford to. Every minute counts. If the Ottomans detect the Austrian approach and abandon the crossing, the entire plan collapses. Eugene needs to arrive at Zenta while the Ottomans are still committed to crossing, when they are locked into a decision they cannot easily reverse. As dawn breaks on August 11th, Eugene's scouts report that they are within 5 miles of Zenta. The men are ordered to halt and rest for a few hours. They collapse where they stand, many falling asleep instantly, despite the discomfort. Eugene allows them 3 hours of rest, then rouses them with quiet orders passed from officer to officer. There is still no drumming, no trumpet calls. The Austrian army moves like a ghost, silent and deadly. The Ottoman army reaches Zenta on the morning of August 11th. Sultan Mustafa surveys the river and makes a decision that will haunt him for the rest of his life. The far bank looks empty. His scouts report no enemy activity within 20 miles. The maps show that once across the Tisza, the road to Szeged is wide open. Mustafa assumes the Austrians are still cowering somewhere to the north. Afraid to meet his superior numbers in open battle, he orders the crossing to begin immediately. This is where the Sultan makes his first fatal mistake. A truly competent commander would send light cavalry across first to scout the far bank and the surrounding area. He would establish a proper bridgehead with infantry and artillery before committing his main force and baggage train. He would secure a perimeter of at least 2 miles around the crossing point to prevent surprise attacks. But Mustafa is impatient. He has been marching for weeks, and he wants to maintain momentum. He is also overconfident. He believes the Austrians are demoralized and disorganized after 15 years of war. He does not respect them as a threat. Mustafa orders his engineers to construct a pontoon bridge using boats lashed together with ropes and chains. It is a massive undertaking, requiring hundreds of boats and thousands of laborers. The Ottomans are skilled at this kind of military engineering. They have been building pontoon bridges for centuries, but speed and quality are inversely related. The faster you build the bridge, the less stable it becomes. Mustafa pushes his engineers to work as quickly as possible. He wants the entire army across by nightfall. The next critical mistake is the order of the crossing. Logic dictates that light cavalry should cross first to scout and secure the area, then heavy infantry to establish defensive positions, then artillery to provide covering fire, and finally the baggage train and non-combatants. But Mustafa, thinking he is being clever, orders the baggage train to cross first. His reasoning is that the baggage train is slow, so by sending it first, he keeps the road clear for the faster-moving combat units. It is the kind of decision that seems smart in a headquarters tent, but turns catastrophic on the battlefield. As the first wagons roll onto the pontoon bridge, groaning under the weight of the Sultan's treasury, personal effects, and supplies, The Ottoman soldiers on the western bank relax. The crossing is going smoothly. There are no enemy scouts, no harassing attacks, nothing to suggest danger. The Janissaries stack their muskets and sit in groups, smoking tobacco from long pipes and talking. The Sipahi cavalry leads their horses down to the river to drink. Camp followers and merchants begin setting up temporary markets, selling food and trinkets to the soldiers. No one is expecting trouble. By noon, roughly 30,000 men and most of the baggage train are on the eastern bank. The Sultan himself crosses around 1 o'clock, establishing his command tent on the far side of the river. He wants to be seen leading from the front. It is good politics, and it boosts morale. But it also means that when disaster strikes, the Sultan will be on the wrong side of the river, cut off from the bulk of his fighting force. Eugene and his army arrive on the scene at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They crest a low ridge about 2 miles from the river and stop. From this vantage point, Eugene can see everything with perfect clarity. He sees the Ottoman army split in half by the Tisza River. He sees roughly 30,000 men already on the far bank, scattered and disorganized, many of them baggage handlers and camp followers rather than combat troops. He sees another 50,000 on the near bank, mostly cavalry and infantry, milling around with no clear defensive positions because they are not expecting an attack. And in the middle, stretching across the water like a fragile thread, is the pontoon bridge, the lifeline connecting the two halves of the Sultan's army. Eugene's officers are stunned into silence. "My God," one of them finally whispers. "They have no idea we are here." Another officer crosses himself and mutters a prayer of thanks. They have marched for over 24 hours with almost no rest, driven by their commander's insane belief that they could catch the Ottomans at the crossing, and here they are. The enemy is split, vulnerable, and completely unaware of the Austrian presence. It is the kind of opportunity that appears once in a lifetime. Eugene does not waste a single second gloating or celebrating. He immediately begins issuing orders with the calm, methodical precision of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. His plan is simple in concept, but requires perfect execution. He will hit the Ottomans on the western bank with his entire force before they can retreat across the bridge or organize a proper defense. He will attempt to destroy or capture the pontoon bridge, trapping the Sultan and his men on the far side. And he will do it so fast that the enemy will not have time to understand what is happening, much less mount an effective response. But there is immediate pushback from his subordinates. Eugene's second-in-command is Guido von Starhemberg, an old Austrian general from a distinguished military family. Starhemberg is brave, competent, and very experienced. He is also cautious to the point of timidity. He looks at the position and immediately sees the risks. "Prince," Starhemberg says carefully, "I must advise against an immediate attack. Look at the sun. It is already past 3 o'clock. We have at most 4 hours of good daylight remaining. If we attack now and the battle goes poorly, we will be fighting in the dark. Nighttime battles are chaos. We could lose control of our units. We could suffer friendly fire casualties. We should camp here, rest the men, and attack at dawn when we have the full day ahead of us." It is sensible advice. In fact, it is exactly what most commanders of this era would do. Warfare in the 17th century follows certain conventions, certain rules. You do not attack late in the day. You do not risk fighting after dark. You do not commit your entire army to a single assault without keeping reserves. But Eugene of Savoy has built his entire career on breaking the rules, when breaking the rules makes sense. He turns to Starhemberg, and there is cold fury in his eyes. "General," Eugene says quietly, "if we wait until tomorrow morning, there will be no battle. The Sultan will have his entire army across the river, and we will have lost our chance. By tomorrow morning, those 50,000 men will be on the far bank, organized and ready to fight. We will have to attack them in a defensive position of their choosing, but right now, right this very moment, they are split by a river. They are disorganized. They think they are safe. This is the opportunity. This is what we marched all night to find. If we do not attack now, every drop of sweat, every blister, every exhausted step was for nothing." Starhemberg opens his mouth to object, but Eugene cuts him off. "I am not asking for your permission, General. I am giving you an order. We attack in 1 hour. Prepare your wing." The tone leaves no room for argument. Starhemberg, to his credit, swallows his objections and salutes. He disagrees with the decision, but he will follow orders. That is the mark of a professional soldier. Eugene uses the next hour to organize his battle plan with meticulous care. He splits his army into 3 wings, each with a specific objective. The center, under his direct command, will hit the Ottoman infantry head-on, driving straight toward the riverbank. This will be the main hammer blow, designed to create chaos and prevent the Ottomans from organizing coherent defensive lines. The right wing, commanded by Starhemberg, despite his objections, will sweep around the Ottoman left flank and make directly for the pontoon bridge. Their objective is to capture or destroy the bridge, cutting off the Sultan and trapping him on the far side. The left wing will pin the Ottoman cavalry against the river, preventing them from escaping or maneuvering. Eugene also positions his artillery with great care. He has perhaps 60 field guns, not a massive number, but enough to make a difference. He places them on the ridge where the Austrians first spotted the enemy. From this elevated position, the cannons have a perfect angle of fire down into the massed Ottoman formations. The gunners are ordered to fire at maximum rate, sacrificing accuracy for volume. The goal is not to kill specific targets, but to create panic and disruption. At exactly 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Eugene gives the order to advance. 60,000 Austrian, Hungarian, and German soldiers begin moving forward in perfect silence. Eugene has ordered complete quiet. No drums, no trumpets, no shouting, no battle cries. The only sound is the rustling of boots through the tall grass, the creaking of leather harnesses, and the metallic jingle of weapons and armor. They move in a massive crescent formation, the horns of the crescent gradually closing in on the Ottoman camp like a noose tightening around a neck. The afternoon sun is low and bright, positioned directly behind the advancing Austrians. This means the Ottomans, if they look west toward the setting sun, will be staring into blinding light. It is a small advantage, but Eugene takes every advantage he can get. The Austrian troops advance in perfect order, maintaining their formations despite the rough ground and the exhaustion of the forced march. They are professionals, many of them veterans of a dozen battles against the Ottomans. They know what is at stake. The first Ottoman soldiers to notice the approaching army think it is a mirage or a trick of the light. The afternoon sun creates shimmering heat waves that distort vision. The Austrians, backlit by the sun, appear as dark silhouettes that seem to waver and shift. It is only when the distance closes to less than half a mile that the truth becomes undeniable. Someone shouts a warning, then another, then 100. The Ottoman camp erupts into chaos. Men scramble for their weapons, which are stacked in neat piles because no one expected to need them. Officers shout contradictory orders. Some commanders order their men to form defensive lines facing west. Others order a retreat toward the bridge. Still others call for a counterattack to drive off what they assume is a small raiding force. The result is confusion and paralysis. The Janissaries, normally the most disciplined troops in the world, mill around in disorder. The Sipahi cavalry mounts their horses in a panic, but there is no clear direction to charge. Horses rear and bolt, adding to the chaos. And then, when the Austrians are just 300 yards away, close enough that individual faces can be distinguished, Eugene gives the signal. The trumpets blare, the drums thunder, and 60,000 men release a battle cry that shakes the earth. It is a sound like the roar of an angry god, a collective scream of rage and aggression that can be heard for miles. And with that sound, the killing begins. The Austrian artillery opens fire first. The gunners on the ridge have been waiting patiently, sighting their cannons on the densest clusters of Ottoman troops. At 300 yards, even smoothbore cannons loaded with solid shot cannot miss. The first volley of 60 cannonballs tears through the packed Ottoman ranks. Each shot kills 5 or 6 men, sometimes more if the ball skips and bounces through the crowd. Arms and legs fly through the air. Men are decapitated or cut in half by the iron projectiles. The survivors, splattered with blood and gore, stare in shock at the carnage. Before the Ottomans can process what is happening, the Austrian infantry crashes into them like a tidal wave hitting a sandcastle. The impact is so violent that men in the front ranks on both sides are killed instantly, crushed between the two colliding forces. But the Austrians have momentum and purpose. The Ottomans have only confusion and fear. The Austrian infantry fights with pikes, muskets, swords, and halberds. They fight in tight formations, each man protected by the shields and weapons of his neighbors. The Ottomans, caught unprepared, fight as individuals, each man struggling to survive without support. Eugene leads the central assault personally. He is mounted on a white horse, deliberately choosing a visible target to inspire his men. He is dressed in a simple officer's uniform, without excessive decoration, but everyone knows who he is. The prince rides at the very front of his infantry, his sword drawn, shouting encouragement. He does not believe in commanding from the safety of the rear. He believes that soldiers fight harder when they see their general sharing the danger, and he is proven right. The Austrian infantry, seeing their commander in the thick of the fighting, push forward with renewed fury. The Ottomans, to their credit, do not break immediately. The Janissaries, once they overcome their initial shock, form a defensive square and unleash volley after volley of musket fire. They are superbly trained marksmen, and their first volleys cut down dozens of Austrian soldiers. Men fall with bullets in their chests, throats, and faces. The Austrian advance slows as the front ranks take casualties. For a few critical minutes, the battle hangs in the balance. If the Janissaries can hold long enough for reinforcements to arrive, they might stabilize the situation. But Eugene has anticipated this. He orders his second line of infantry to advance through the gaps in the first line, maintaining constant pressure. As soon as the front rank takes casualties and begins to falter, fresh troops step forward to take their places. It is a tactic Eugene learned from studying the Romans, the principle of relief lines that allow an army to maintain pressure indefinitely. The Janissaries, fighting magnificently, kill scores of Austrians. But for every Austrian who falls, two more step forward. The Ottoman square, surrounded on three sides, begins to shrink. Meanwhile, on the flanks, the real massacre is unfolding. Starhemberg's right wing has successfully reached the riverbank and is now attacking the pontoon bridge. The bridge guards, who were expecting a quiet day, find themselves facing thousands of Austrian cavalry charging at full gallop. The horsemen crash into the Ottoman engineers and bridge guards, cutting them down with sabers and trampling them under iron-shod hooves. The fighting at the bridge is brutal and close quarters. Men grapple and stab with daggers. They bite and gouge. They drag each other into the river, where they drown, locked in death grips. Within minutes, the western end of the pontoon bridge is in Austrian hands. Starhemberg's men begin systematically destroying it, cutting the ropes and chains that hold the boats together. Boats drift away downstream, carrying wounded men who scream for help that will never come. The lifeline between the two halves of the Ottoman army is severed. Men trying to flee across the bridge from the western bank are shot, stabbed, or shoved into the water. The Tisza River, normally muddy brown, begins to turn red with blood. On the far bank, Sultan Mustafa II watches in absolute horror as his army is destroyed before his eyes. He can see the smoke rising from the battlefield. He can hear the cannons and the screaming, but there is nothing he can do. His 30,000 men on the eastern bank are trapped. The bridge is gone. The river is too wide and too deep to swim, especially for men wearing any kind of armor or carrying weapons. If they try to swim back to help their comrades, they will drown. If they stay where they are useless. The Sultan, the absolute monarch of a vast empire, is forced to stand helpless while half his army is slaughtered. Back on the western bank, the Ottoman resistance is collapsing sector by sector. The Janissaries, surrounded on all sides with the river at their backs, fight with the courage of doomed men. They know there will be no quarter, no mercy, no chance of survival. Some try to surrender, throwing down their weapons and raising their hands. The Austrians cut them down anyway. This is not a battle for prisoners. This is revenge. 15 years of Ottoman aggression, 15 years of burned villages and enslaved Christians, 15 years of terror and humiliation are being repaid in blood. The Austrian soldiers, many of whom have lost family members to Ottoman raids, show no mercy. The Ottoman cavalry, the proud Sipahi, who are supposed to be the sword of Islam, try desperately to organize a counterattack. These are brave men, skilled horsemen who have trained for war since childhood. But the terrain betrays them. The ground near the river is soft and muddy from recent rains. The horses lose their footing, slipping and sliding in the muck. And waiting for them are the Austrian dragoons, lighter cavalry specifically trained to fight against Ottoman horsemen. The clash of cavalry is short and brutal. The Ottomans, hampered by bad footing and disorganization, are driven back into their own infantry, creating even more chaos. As the sun begins to set, the killing reaches a fever pitch. The Austrians have completely surrounded the Ottoman forces on the western bank. There is no escape. The river is behind them, filling with bodies. The Austrians are in front of them, pressing forward relentlessly. Men trying to swim across the Tisza are shot by Austrian marksmen positioned along the bank or dragged down by the current. Those who stay on land are cut down in the gathering darkness. The battle has become a massacre, a systematic extermination of the Sultan's finest troops. Eugene rides through the carnage, his white horse now splattered with blood. He rallies his men when they show signs of exhaustion. He directs artillery fire at remaining pockets of resistance. He personally leads charges into the thickest fighting, his sword rising and falling in a rhythm of death. His uniform is torn and blood-stained. His face is blackened with powder smoke, but his eyes are clear and focused. He is in his element, doing what he was born to do. Around him, the Ottoman army is dying. By 7 o'clock in the evening, the battle is effectively over. The western bank of the Tisza River is a slaughterhouse. The elite of the Ottoman army, the soldiers who were supposed to recapture Hungary and march on Vienna, are dead or dying. The few survivors are scattered, hiding in the reeds along the riverbank or fleeing into the gathering darkness. The Austrian soldiers, their bloodlust finally sated, begin the grim work of looting the dead and finishing off the wounded. They find treasures beyond imagination. The Ottoman camp is a city unto itself, and it is all now Austrian property. The soldiers find gold coins by the barrel, enough to fill wagon after wagon. They find jeweled weapons, silk tents, fine carpets, and exotic spices. They find the personal baggage of Ottoman nobles, filled with perfumes, silverware, and illuminated manuscripts. Most valuable of all, they find the Sultan's personal treasury, which had crossed the bridge earlier in the day. Chests filled with gold dinars, tribute money collected from across the empire, now belong to Eugene and his men. Eugene orders his officers to organize the collection of plunder systematically. He knows that soldiers will fight each other over treasure if it is not controlled. He establishes collection points where everything is brought and recorded. Later, it will be divided according to rank and contribution. Officers get larger shares, common soldiers smaller ones, but everyone gets something. This will pay for the next 3 years of war, Eugene tells his staff. It is not hyperbole. The captured treasure is worth millions in modern currency. The body count begins as soon as there is enough light to see. Austrian soldiers walk the battlefield, counting corpses. They stop at 30,000 and give up because there are simply too many bodies to count accurately. Some historians later argue the number is exaggerated, that surely 30,000 men could not have died in a single afternoon. But the eyewitness accounts are consistent. The Tisza River is choked with corpses for miles downstream. Bodies pile up against the ruined bridge. The ground is carpeted with the dead, layered 3 and 4 deep in places where the fighting was most intense. Among the dead are some of the finest soldiers in the Ottoman Empire. The Janissary Corps is decimated. Entire ordas, the Janissary equivalent of regiments, are wiped out. The officers and veterans, the men with experience and skill, are gone. What remains is a hollow shell. The Sipahi cavalry suffers similar losses. Thousands of mounted warriors, the military aristocracy of the empire, are dead. Their horses, many of them valuable breeding stock, are captured or killed. The loss of horseflesh alone represents a fortune. The Austrian losses, by contrast, are astonishingly light, fewer than 500 dead and perhaps 2,000 wounded. Some of the wounded will die in the coming days from infection or blood loss, but even counting them, the disparity is staggering. It is one of the most lopsided victories in military history, comparable to the ancient Battle of Cannae or the more recent Battle of Agincourt. The kill ratio defies belief. For every Austrian who fell, more than 60 Ottomans died. But numbers alone do not capture the magnitude of what has happened here. Among the dead are not just soldiers, but the hopes and dreams of an empire. The Sultan had assembled this army to turn the tide of the war, to reclaim Hungary, to threaten Vienna once more. In a single afternoon, those ambitions died with 30,000 men. The Ottoman Empire will never again pose a serious offensive threat to Central Europe. The age of Ottoman expansion is over. The long decline has begun. Sultan Mustafa II, watching from across the river, is a broken man. As the battle rages and his army is destroyed, his guards urge him to flee before the Austrians find boats and cross the river to capture him. Reluctantly, the Sultan agrees. As darkness falls, he boards a small boat with a handful of bodyguards and begins rowing downstream, away from the carnage. He leaves behind everything: his treasury, his personal tent, his weapons, his dignity, and his 30,000 dead soldiers. The Sultan's escape is chaotic and humiliating. He has to abandon his fine clothes and dress as a common soldier to avoid recognition. He leaves his personal Quran behind, a holy book that has been in his family for generations. That Quran, encrusted with jewels and illuminated with gold leaf, is found by an Austrian sergeant who has no idea what it is. He sells it to a merchant for a few coins. It eventually makes its way to a museum in Vienna, where it remains to this day, a trophy of the greatest Ottoman defeat in history. As the Sultan flees downstream in the darkness, the Austrian camp erupts in celebration. The soldiers, exhausted and bloodied, build massive bonfires using Ottoman tents and supplies. They roast captured livestock and break open barrels of wine found in the enemy camp. They sing victory songs and toast their commander. Prince Eugene, standing apart from the revelry, watches his men celebrate. He does not join them. He is already thinking about the next campaign, the next battle, the next challenge. For Eugene, victory is not an end, but a beginning. The news of Zenta spreads across Europe with astonishing speed. Within days, messengers are galloping toward Vienna, Rome, Paris, and London with reports of the incredible victory. In Vienna, Emperor Leopold receives the news with tears of relief and joy. He orders the church bells rung for 3 days straight. He declares a week of thanksgiving. He elevates Eugene to the rank of Prince of the Holy Roman Empire and showers him with titles, lands, and honors. In Rome, Pope Innocent XII, the successor to the Pope who blessed the Holy League, orders special masses of thanksgiving in every church in Christendom. He commissions a painting commemorating the battle to hang in the Vatican. He refers to Eugene as the Sword of Christendom and the Defender of the Faith. For the Catholic Church, Zenta is not just a military victory, but a religious triumph, proof that God favors the Christian cause. In Paris, King Louis XIV reads the reports in stunned, bitter silence. The scrawny boy he rejected as unfit for war has just won one of the greatest victories of the century. The little Frenchman he mocked has become the most celebrated general in Europe. Louis, a man of enormous ego and pride, cannot bring himself to publicly acknowledge Eugene's achievement. But privately, he admits to his ministers that rejecting Eugene was a mistake. It is perhaps the only mistake Louis ever publicly acknowledges. In London, the news is celebrated with bonfires, street parties, and the ringing of church bells. The English, though not directly involved in the war, see Zenta as a victory for all of Christendom against the Islamic threat. Pamphleteers print broadsheets describing the battle in lurid detail, often exaggerating the casualties and the heroics. Eugene becomes a celebrity across Protestant and Catholic Europe alike, one of the few figures who can unite the fractured Christian world in admiration. For the Ottoman Empire, the disaster at Zenta is a wound from which they never fully recover. Sultan Mustafa II returns to Constantinople in disgrace. He has lost 30,000 men, his personal treasury, his credibility, and his reputation. The Janissaries, who have deposed sultans before, look at him with contempt. The provincial governors, who supply troops and money for imperial campaigns, begin to question whether the sultan deserves their loyalty. The empire Mustafa rules is financially exhausted, militarily humiliated, and politically unstable. Within 2 years, in 1699, Sultan Mustafa is deposed by a palace coup. The Janissaries, citing his failure at Zenta and his inability to protect Ottoman interests, declare him unfit to rule. He is locked away in a golden cage in the Topkapi Palace, while his younger brother takes the throne as Sultan Ahmed III. Mustafa lives for another 4 years as a prisoner in his own palace, spending his days reading and praying. He dies in 1733, a forgotten man, remembered only for his catastrophic defeat. The grand strategy of conquering Vienna and pushing into the heart of Europe is abandoned forever after Zenta. The Ottoman Empire, which has been expanding for 300 years, goes into reverse. Over the next 2 centuries, they will fight defensive wars, slowly losing territory year by year to Austria, Russia, and other European powers. The Balkans will be gradually reclaimed by Christian states. The myth of Ottoman invincibility, built over centuries of conquest, is shattered and never rebuilt. Eugene of Savoy, meanwhile, becomes the most celebrated general in Europe. At 34, he has achieved what few commanders accomplish in a lifetime, but he does not rest on his laurels. Over the next 2 decades, he will win even more battles, fighting the French in the War of Spanish Succession alongside the Duke of Marlborough. He will capture cities, defeat armies, and earn the respect of every monarch in Christendom. But Zenta remains his masterpiece, the battle that secured his legend and changed the course of European history. The Treaty of Karlowitz is signed in 1699, just 2 years after Zenta. It is the first time in Ottoman history that the empire signs a peace treaty as the defeated party, surrendering territory rather than demanding it. The Ottomans lose most of Hungary, territories they have held for over a century. They lose Transylvania, parts of Croatia and Slovenia, and several key fortresses in Serbia. It is the beginning of the long decline, the slow unwinding of an empire that once seemed unstoppable. And it all begins on that August afternoon in 1697 when 80,000 Ottoman soldiers tried to cross the Tisza River at Zenta. 30,000 of them died before reaching the other side, killed by the tactical genius of a short, sickly Frenchman whom no one expected to amount to anything. Eugene of Savoy, rejected by the Sun King as unfit for war, had just saved Christian Europe and delivered a blow that would echo through the centuries. The myth of Ottoman invincibility died in the Tisza River, along with 30,000 of the Sultan's finest soldiers. And a new era, the age of European dominance, was born in fire and blood on the banks of a muddy river in the heart of the Balkans.